Well, welcome back. We've moving right along into the Detroit Lions. Dad, your team, of course. Exciting times for Lions fans as they're going to be really good again this year. Even better, potentially, hopefully. Obviously, disappointing end to their season, which we won't talk about. But for fantasy, this team's loaded. They just talked about it right before we hit record. Potentially the only team to have two first round picks, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall could also be there, but yeah, I mean, it's all systems go for these Lions, and it all starts with the captain. I think he's the captain of the team, Jared Goff, freshly paid, big contract, 29. He's good enough for Detroit, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
29.8 years old, no problems there. He's round 8, ADP 93, says QB 12. You see the numbers there? I mean, he's just consistent, top 15, top 12 quarter. He's going to be top 12 if he's healthy, essentially. Not difference making stuff because he doesn't provide anything on the ground, but in terms of his passing, he's on one of the best offenses, and he's really good at home and he's really good indoors. And I think I heard that the Lions actually only have 2 games outdoors this year, which kind of just shows you how the NFL's stadium-wise has changed.
Well, they have to be Chicago and Green Bay because that's who they play in their division.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at it now. I mean, you get Rams, and their start of the season, by the way, because your fantasy team, you draft it week 1 or whatever, it changes by week 5. So you got to think about that sometimes. Their start, they get the Rams at home, the Bucks at home, at Arizona, home to Seattle. Then they go to Dallas, Minnesota, Green Bay, Houston's indoors, Indianapolis is indoors. Yeah, so it's just those 2 games, I think. They play Buffalo at home. San Francisco's indoors or outdoors?
Outdoors. So.
Outdoors. Okay, so 3, but it's San Francisco. Not terrible. But if you've been watching these, a lot of these quarterbacks, they say, I'm going to pass. This is kind of the range of where I like to take my quarterbacks, and Goff, Cousins, those guys are definitely on the list of just some consistent players. So, Dad, what do you think about Goff? You happy to wait until round 8, get your QB1 then, and it's Jared Goff?
Yeah, I'd be all right with it. And I always thought, I know he got tossed out like a piece of trash there a couple of years ago, and I always kind of thought, he took a team to the Super Bowl, and I'm sorry, Sean McVay wasn't taking the snaps, but Goff never got his. So dude's always had a chip on his shoulder, so and I don't blame him, and but 4,500 yards last year, 30 touchdowns. I mean, what more do you need,
Yep. Yeah, and you see the QB 15 per game, which doesn't excite people, but there was 3 guys in Richardson, Kyler, and Flacco, which were above, but those guys did it for half a season, not even half a season for Flacco and Richardson. They did it in 4 or 5 games. So over the course of an entire season, he was, more like QB 12 if you take those guys out. So, I mean, he has a good offense. His offense coordinator came back. He's throwing to some nice options. The only thing with Goff is there's going to be a couple games where the Lions just have like 5 rushing touchdowns and Goff doesn't have anything just because that's how they're built. That's going to happen. And so you will get some games like that because he's not going to rush at all. So there will be a couple games like that. You got to kind of live with it, basically. Like, you're not going to be able to predict it, essentially. So, but it's nice to be able to wait 8-9 rounds and get your QB1 and just stack up on other positions. So, Jahmyr Gibbs, interesting player here. ADP, you see him there. This is half PPR, by the way. Everything, all the stats in ADP. This is 13th overall, round 2, but I've seen him go first round plenty of times. RB5, so he's behind the He's kind of behind, the Bijan, Brees, McCaffrey, and I believe I'm trying to remember who's the RB4 there. Is it Saquon or Jonathan Taylor? I'll pull that up in just a second. But he's unique in the sense of normally players. It's Jonathan Taylor. Normally players in this range, first round picks, you're not, especially at running back. It's like their backfield and no one else's, like that's it. They're the main guys, right? Again, you look at the guys going ahead of around him: McCaffrey, Brees Hall, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon. Those are guys. It's no question who the number one is, who's going to get all the touches and catches. That's not the case for Gibbs. So, are you worried about this potential first round, second round pick? Early second round pick for Gibbs, or you think he's just going to be super efficient, explosive?
Well, yeah, I guess my answer would be, yeah, I think about it. Yeah, and of course you're just talking about David Montgomery as the other guy, and the Lions aren't going to move off that. Let's just say Gibbs will have probably a similar. He's not going to come down, but he's going to have his low end would be a repeat of last year.
Okay, yeah,
that's what I think. So
that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, he had double-digit touchdowns last year. There were some games and they were early, where they didn't seem like they were, they were just kind of holding off using Gibbs and stuff like that. So, I expect a little bit more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the team. It's the team and the coaching and all that. So it has nothing to do with Gibbs and anything else. They're still going to use Montgomery. I think I think Gibbs missed a game last year, so maybe, and they had a slow start, but geez, he almost had 1,000 yards. So I mean,
yeah, and I think with him, it is just a little interesting because again, for running backs, we never draft running backs when there's another running back on the team that's going to get 200 carries. That's if healthy, he's going to get 200 carries and also double-digit touchdowns. You mentioned it with Gibbs last year. Low end is he repeats last year, and he was RB11 last year in points per game. 1,100 total yards, 11 total touchdowns, 52 catches. So, I don't really see necessarily the rushing or the touchdowns going up too much, but I do see receiving potentially going up, maybe just 10 more catches and 100 more yards, or 15 more catches and 150 more yards, or something along those lines, which would get him into like that top 7 running back range. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I see, what's funny is the last half of the season, because you think of Montgomery, he comes in goal line. They were even in their goal line red zone carries. I forget if it's red zone or at the goal line at the 5 or whatever carries. They were even. It was like 13 and 13 or 12 and 12. Now in the playoffs, it was all Montgomery. So does that kind of lend you to believe like that's where, in crunch time and in real games, and they're gonna do Montgomery? But
yeah, I don't think so I watched every one of their games last year. It wasn't like they were pulling Gibbs out at the goal line and Montgomery was getting in. So
definitely not at the end of it. No,
I mean, that's through the year. Montgomery missed some games and stuff like that. It's like they kind of went with who's ever in the game, at the goal line and stuff. So just, they're a high scoring team. I mean, and a lot of touchdowns to go around, and you got running backs. You got 2 running backs. I think, what do we have? 25 touchdowns between the two. So,
they're both top 15.
Yeah, that's quite quite the production.
Yeah. Yeah. And just looking at it, like the last from weeks 13 on, Gibbs' snap share 45%, 63, 48, 58, 62, 51. So we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of those games, he outsnapped Montgomery. 4 of the 6 games. So they could use him more as well. They, don't really have a consistent, as of right now, a third option catching the ball behind St. Brown and LaPorta. It could be Gibbs. What if it is Gibbs? So I just think there's a possibility that Gibbs repeats the rushing production, gets close to 10 touchdowns, but catches 70 passes or 75 passes. I think there's a world, and that's where I think we're going to need to see to get to justifying him being a first round pick. And if Montgomery gets hurt, though, there's always that upside, like he's going to smash. Speaking of Montgomery, 27 years old. We talked a lot about him already. We said last year we loved him, the value he was going. I think he was going right around this range of round 7, round 8, and I had him on all my teams. And he was the RB12 in points per game, 14.2 points, and I don't really see it changing. Like, to me, he's still a good value. He's still a good value. He's going to be a low end, maybe as high as a high RB2. Maybe even a top 12 guy like he was last year. Like, that's definitely the Lions have 2 years in a row now of 2 different guys having 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns in Jamal Williams and Montgomery. Like, why do we think that's going to change? I guess so.
I don't think it's going to. And this was done in 14 games.
Yes.
And I know one of those games he got hurt, so you could even count it like 13 games or something. But
yep. Yeah, I mean, his receiving did come down quite a lot, actually. I thought he'd get a little bit more just because he caught 54 passes one year in Chicago, 42 in another, only 16 this year. So, but I see the same of the guy's going to get. So he had 219 carries in those 14 games that he played. So he's averaging over 15 carries a game. I don't see that changing. He's going to get 15 carries. He's going to get 1 or 2 catches a game. And he's going to always be a chance to score touchdowns because this team's going to be moving the ball. And they're going to run the ball when they get down to the goal line. Like, they will run the ball.
Yeah.
So I think he's still an incredible value in terms of like that round 7, low-end RB2. And I think that's his floor. Absolute floor is like RB21.
I think in a draft this year, you're not going to be able to sneak him in, and people are going to be looking for Montgomery or something. I think last year he was kind of ignored or something. I don't think he's going to move up or anything else, but he's definitely not going to fall down. He's not going to fall down on people's draft boards or ADPs or anything like that. So,
yeah. There is a mental part of it, though, where it's like, well, if Jahmyr Gibbs is there and he's number 1 and going in the first round, Montgomery's not going to do anything. That's why Jahmyr Gibbs was a second-round pick last year. It's, maybe third-round pick. That's why Montgomery was so low. But there is a little bit of like, you do look at the last 6 weeks or so when Gibbs started to play more, and he was a little bit of a touchdown or bust kind of player. 10 for 66 and 3 catches for 19 yards is not great, right? 17 carries, 85 yards, 17 carries, 55 yards. Without touchdowns, those aren't great. So, but he's going to get those touchdowns more often than not. So I think he only had 2 games last year where he didn't score a touchdown, which is kind of crazy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, this is the heart of the offense. The offense goes through him. He is ADP 8th overall. This is half PPR. PPR, he's even higher. He's round 1, and he's wide receiver 5. It's behind CD, Tyreek, Chase, and Jefferson. I think after CD and Tyreek, you can make a case for Amon-Ra St. Brown as the next receiver off the board because of consistency. Last year, the dude, he was 4th per game in half PPR, averaging 17 points a game, 1 of 4 receivers to average 17 points per game. And you look at his game log, he had 1 bad game I think he was potentially hurt that game, but he had one game under double-digit points. One. That's pretty crazy. I mean, you look at Tyreek Hill, he had 1, 2, 3 under double-digit points. CeeDee Lamb, 1, 2, 3, 3 under double-digit points, right? Like usually you get 3 or 4, even from the studs. He had 1 because you just can't stop him. And if the only chance that he gives you a bad game is if the Lions offense just kind of melts down for a game. So where's he at for you? Is he wide receiver 2, 3, 4 behind CD and Tyreek?
Well, yeah, for me, he's a first rounder. That's just the way. And I think I always get a little concerned about contract things, related to CeeDee Lamb. So I don't know.
Chase.
What's that?
Ja'Marr Chase as well.
And now we got guys who sit out, and not necessarily in the NFL, but it's like, Justin Jefferson. Well, I'm not going to play until I get a contract and hurt my hamstring again or something like that. The NBA with their BS of resting guys, and so I don't know. So what am I trying to say is, does that move, the sun god here? Does that move him up in the pecking order in my mind? Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, it's McCaffrey, Lamb, Hill. Those guys, in my opinion, should be going kind of 1, 2, 3 in any order. And after that, it's a conversation of, do you want Chase? If you're going to take a receiver, is it Chase, St. Brown, or Jefferson? And Jefferson has quarterback questions. Chase, you can make the argument for, but also, you can make the argument for what's more valuable than a player who literally never busts or busts once in a season. Never gives you a goose egg
that's a fantasy dream. You want guys to produce. I mean, there's some guys that they'll have 50 points or 40 points in a game, but they're the rest of them, there's 8 or 12 or something. But you got somebody's put 15 to 20 up, every week. That's winning material there.
Yeah. I mean, one game where he had less than 7 targets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of his 16 games, he had double-digit targets. Like, you can't cover him. You even saw it in the playoff games: 7 for 110, 8 for 77, 7 for 87. You can't really cover him. The offense runs through him. If they have a good offensive day, he's going to do well. His one bust game was when they played Chicago at Chicago and they scored 13 points. I'm sure the weather was bad because that was in December, So, yeah, I mean, he's awesome. And
when you look at him and you watch him in a game and you go, how does this guy get open all the time?
Yeah.
Aren't you guys double teaming him? But he's there.
Yeah, he's part of there's an elite 8 group of players that I want to walk away from every drafting, and he's one of them. So, Jameson Williams I put up here because it's kind of make or break for Jameson. First round pick. A lot of people thought he was the best receiver in that draft class. That was the what was that? The London Olave Garrett Wilson draft class. Was that one?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people thought he was the number 1 guy, but he tore his ACL in the championship game or late in the season, and we knew year 1 was going to be a red shirt year essentially, and it was for him. And then year 2 comes and we're getting excited, and he gets busted for gambling and misses the first, what was it, 4 games, 6 games? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was 6. It got reduced to 4. So,
but he also, I don't think he was allowed into like training camp and stuff, or was he? I can't remember.
He was in training camp.
Okay.
And they just sent him away and stuff like that. So, but
yeah,
he hasn't. I don't know. This is his year. If the Lions move farther on, they get to the Super Bowl. It's got to be J-Mo, and Amon-Ra St. Brown and LaPorta and Gibbs. I mean, it has to be all of them combined.
Yeah. And so he's going, it's interesting because he's going around 9 at 107, right? ADP of 107. Round 9 is, again, we're talking for most people, I think, first bench player. Like, some significant guys going around. Just for reference, other receivers. I mean, it's not big names, but it's guys like, with potential upside. Keon Coleman, Brian Thomas, guys like that. The rookies, JSN is going around there. Curtis Samuel, guys with, I think, maybe some upside or something like that. So he's an interesting one just because we haven't seen it at all, but there's definitely opportunity because, like we just talked about with Gibbs, they need a consistent third option, right? They do. They need a consistent third option. So, after LaPorta and St. Brown, is that Jameson? And I think it is telling that in a stacked wide receiver draft class, the Lions did not draft anyone. Maybe they did in like round 6 or 7, but they didn't draft anyone in the first few rounds. They didn't bring anyone else in really. So they're kind of saying like, JMO, we believe in you. And so when you talk about this range of players, there's not a whole lot more with upside than, in my opinion, than Jameson Williams. So are you going to take a shot on him in the round 9, or do you want to just kind of pass on him?
Yeah, I would take absolutely. I think it's going to happen this year. And to what level, I don't know. We're still trying to figure out where does he fit in. Is he just an over-the-top type guy, or is he some kind of volume receiver? And I think, I think this is your third year, buddy. We've had no disruptions in the off season of injuries or gambling or something like that. So, like you said, a first bench player, or he's a third wide receiver on your fantasy team, and be like a flex guy. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. But there is big potential of like, normally, we do see these guys at least because, he's never really had a big game. Like he's never had that moment. You're like, oh, he had that 42-yard touchdown run in the playoff game against the 49ers, but he's never had like a complete game where it's like, oh, that's why he was drafted this high, right? Like his career high in receiving yards is 69. Usually we see these guys at least flash a little bit. So that's the concern. And it is a concern. He could just be a big bust and he's like 3 or 4 targets, stretches the field for the Lions, but he's not consistent at all for fantasy. So last guy here is Sam LaPorta, going as the tight end 1, was the tight end 1 last year in points per game. We actually tied with Kelsey in points per game at 11.5. He's a fringe round 2, round 3 pick. He's right on that round 2, round 3 turn. I'll just say it. I think LaPorta is awesome. He had an amazing year. Maybe the best we've ever seen. I think it is the best we've ever seen because no one was around to watch Mike Ditka's rookie year. But the touchdowns were there. The targets, almost 1,000 yards. I'm going to be out on him just because I think you have to pay the premium price for him. And I don't want to do that when I can get, Trey McBride or Mark Andrews 2 rounds later. And I think they have just as much of a chance to be tight end 1. So, Dad, I know he's your guy. He's your boy. Are you going to be in on him on that 2-3 turn?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a little tasty, Unfortunately, for the reasons that you just explained, I might have to pass, unfortunately. So,
yeah. And again, it was tight. He had a tight end 1 season, but it wasn't Kelsey tight end 1. It was 11.5 points per game. You look at Kelsey in 2022, 15.4. Kelsey or Mark Andrews in 2021 was up there at 15. Like Kelsey in 2020, 17.4. So like, yeah, he was tight end 1, but he wasn't Kelsey Andrews tight end one, which he can get to. I'm not saying he can't. He definitely could. Like he was a freaking rookie and he had 80 catches and 10 touchdowns and 900 yards or whatever. He almost 900 yards, so 85 catches. So he can definitely improve on those.
Yeah, and Goff relied on him and he looked for him, and there was a connection. I always like seeing that tight end quarterback connection, and it was there. Pretty amazing for a rookie tight end, So
yeah, I 100% agree. So there is that argument. I think I just want to see that elite season before I'm taking him in that elite range, because I think he'll put up 11, 12 points per game. Yeah, but I don't think that justifies the second round, early third round pick at the tight end position. So, but there you have it. You have 1, 2, 3 guys potentially going in the first 2 rounds in fantasy drafts. Montgomery and Goff are going to be starters, so lots of offense on this team. Hopefully they can go even further this year. We will see. I think they're going to be really, really good, but will be fun to watch. And they get to play the Rams week 1, so that'll be a fun game.
Yep.
Any last words there, Dad? No surprises to our longest show.
Hopefully things go right. The injury bug. Defense has to play, but a lot of good fantasy candidates for the Lions. And again, they score a lot of points offensively, so you're gonna get some production out of these guys.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. So there you have it. We will be back tomorrow with the rivals, the Green Bay Packers. Just funny that they fall back to back alphabetically. We will talk to you in that show.